Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, well, it's pretty straightforward. We take the information, you've gathered all those articles, the research, your notes, and we really plunge into it together.
Exactly. We want to pull out the absolute most important knowledge, the essential insights, maybe even some surprising facts.
It's all about getting you thoroughly informed and, quickly.
That's right. Think of us as your guides, sort of navigating this complex landscape of information you've got. We're here to help cut through the noise and really understand what matters.
What has real impact from all that material.
Precisely.
And for this deep dive, we're exploring something, well, it's foundational to pretty much everyone's digital life these days, the security of your web browser.
Specifically, we're looking at a series of recent actively exploited vulnerabilities in Google Chrome. You often hear them called 0 days.
Yeah, and the information we're working from, it paints a really compelling picture, doesn't it? Shows this incredibly dynamic, fast-paced world of browser security.
It really does. It reveals the sophisticated nature of the threats we face online and gives a glimpse into this constant high-stakes battle between the security folks and the attackers.
What really jumps out at me right from the start is just how significant these specific findings are.
That they're not theoretical.
Exactly. These aren't just flaws found in some lab somewhere. The core message here is that these vulnerabilities are being used right now in actual attacks.
Which brings the potential threat right to your doorstep, basically. Your computer, your laptop, even your phone.
So understanding these particular vulnerabilities, it isn't just academic, is it?
Not at all. The details about how they were found, how they work, who found them, that gives us crucial insights into the current threat landscape.
And it really hammers home why keeping your software secure, well, it's more vital than ever.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we really dive deep into the technical stuff and what it all means, we do want to take a moment and gratefully acknowledge our sponsor. This deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're a recognized leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
And in today's world, with ransomware and data breaches constantly in the headlines, having that robust, secure storage isn't just nice to have, it's essential.
Totally. Stonefly specializes in providing exactly that. They offer air-gapped and immutable storage solutions. These are designed specifically to protect your critical data from even the most sophisticated attacks.
So if secure ransomware-proof storage is a priority for you or your organization, and it probably should be, we really encourage you to reach out to Stonefly.
Yeah, you can schedule a demo, see their solutions for yourself. Just contact sales@stonefly.com. They're really at the forefront of data protection.
Definitely worth checking out. Okay, so speaking of protecting critical assets, let's turn back to that digital asset we probably use more than any other, the web browser.
Right. Let's unpack this core concept, 0-day vulnerabilities. We hear the term a lot in security news, but what does it actually mean in practice?
And why is it so particularly concerning when it affects something like your browser?
Exactly.
Okay, so at its core, a 0-day vulnerability is basically a flaw in software that the vendor, like Google, in this case with Chrome, doesn't know about until it's found being actively used by attackers out in the wild.
So the name 0-day, it literally means the vendor has had 0 days to fix it since they found out it was being weaponized.
That's the idea. 0 days warning before it's known to be a live threat.
So wait, it's not necessarily 0 days since the flaw existed? Maybe it was there for ages.
Could be, yeah.
But it's 0 days of opportunity for Google to push out a patch before the bad guys started using it.
Precisely. And 0 days for you, the user, to apply a fix once the threat is even known. The attackers have the head start.
Right. That represents a period of, well, maximum risk for users, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Attackers find the flaw, they develop an exploit that's the tool to take advantage of the flaw, and they deploy it. All before the defenders, the vendor and the security community, are even aware it's happening.
And once those attacks are detected, maybe by security researchers or someone responding to an incident,
then it kicks off this frantic race, right? The vendor scrambles to create, test, distribute a patch, and users need to actually apply it.
And that's the crucial difference from let's say, a standard vulnerability discovery.
Right. Usually, a researcher finds a bug, reports it privately to the vendor responsible disclosure, they call it.
The vendor works on a fix, and then the public announcement of the vulnerability and the patch release happen more or less together.
Exactly. That gives users a window, a fighting chance, to update before widespread exploitation can even begin.
But with a 0 day, that proactive defense window, it's just gone.
Poof. gone. The attacks are already underway when the vulnerability becomes public knowledge or known to the vendor.
And when that vulnerable software is your web browser, something you use constantly, interacting with all sorts of untrusted content from all over the internet.
The implications are, well, pretty significant.
Because you don't necessarily need to be tricked into downloading some dodgy file anymore.
Nope. Just visiting a website could potentially be enough to trigger the exploit.
Wow.
And that's what makes these browser 0 days so potent. And it's why the information we're digging into here, detailing these real-world exploited flaws, is so important for understanding what's actually happening out there.
Okay, with that foundation laid, let's zero in on the most recent threat highlighted in the material we have. CVE 2025-541 time.
Right. This is one that was published very recently. Google confirmed it's being actively exploited in the wild right now.
And it's categorized as high severity. The technical description gives us some key details about its nature.
It does. It points to it being an out-of-bounds read and write vulnerability.
Okay, out-of-bounds read and write. Sounds like a memory issue. Can you break that down a bit? Maybe in simple terms, but also with enough detail for folks who follow this stuff?
Sure. So imagine your computer's memory, right? Like a huge set of storage lockers, each with a unique address. When a program like Chrome runs, the operating system gives it specific blocks of these lockers, certain memory regions that it's allowed to use. It's supposed to only read data and run instructions within its assigned space.
Makes sense. Stay in your own lane.
Exactly. So an out-of-bounds read is when the program tries to peek into a locker outside its designated area.
And an out-of-bounds write.
That's when it tries to put something into a locker it's not supposed to access.
Like reading someone else's mail. Or worse, sticking a nasty note in their mailbox.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. In software, this usually happens because of a programming mistake. Maybe the code miscalculated an address or didn't check the size of some data properly.
An honest mistake, maybe.
Could be, but attackers can deliberately craft input like a specially designed web page that forces the vulnerable software to attempt these out-of-bounds accesses. They trigger the mistake on purpose.
Okay. And where exactly in Chrome was this specific vulnerability found?
The information points to Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine.
V8. That rings a bell. That's a critical piece, isn't it?
Hugely critical and incredibly complex. V8 is the engine that compiles and runs all the JavaScript code that makes modern websites interactive. You know, dynamic content, animations, complex web apps, it's mostly V8 working behind the scenes.
So it's processing code from basically every website you visit, untrusted code.
Exactly. And it has to do it super fast, so it's highly optimized. But that complexity makes it a prime target for both security researchers looking for bugs and attackers looking for exploits.
Attacking V8, it's like attacking the brain that makes websites work.
Pretty much. And the consequence described for this specific out-of-bounds issue, it could allow a remote attacker, someone over the internet, maybe with no special access beforehand, to potentially exploit heap corruption.
Yeah.
Just by getting you to visit a crafted HTML page, a booby-trapped website.
Heap corruption. Okay, that term sounds bad. What is the heap, and how does corrupting it relate to writing out of bounds?
Right, so the heap is another chunk of memory the program uses. It's different from where the program's code or fixed data lives. The heap is for dynamic memory allocation.
Meaning?
Meaning the program asks the operating system for chunks of memory while it's running, as needed, and then gives them back when it's done. Think of it like a pool of memory resources it can borrow from and return to.
Okay, a flexible memory pool.
Exactly. Heap corruption means the data or the structures that manage this pool keep track of what's free, how big the chunks are, pointers maybe have been damaged or messed with.
And how does writing data out of bounds cause that?
Well, if a program writes data past the end of its assigned memory block on the heap, it might accidentally overwrite the management data for the next block.
Ah, okay. Collateral damage.
Right. But a skilled attacker doesn't rely on accidents. They carefully craft the data they write out of bounds to deliberately corrupt these management structures in a very specific way.
Not just crashing the program, then.
Crashing is one outcome, yeah. But the real goal for an attacker is to manipulate the heap so that later legitimate memory operations performed by the browser itself can be hijacked or misused to achieve the attacker's goals, like making the browser run the attacker's code.
Which leads us straight to the potential impacts described in the material.
Precisely. And they're severe. The list includes hijacking execution that's running the attacker's code.
The big one.
Yeah. Exposing sensitive data reading memory they shouldn't be able to. Executing arbitrary code, basically doing whatever they want within the browser's process.
Which could lead to system compromise.
Potentially, yes. Or at the very least, crashing the user's browser or even their machine.
And all of this potentially triggered just by visiting one malicious website, a crafted HTML page.
Yeah.
That's a really low barrier for the attacker.
It is minimal user interaction needed that makes it dangerous for widespread attacks or even highly targeted ones.
The severity ratings reflect that too. Chromium Security flagged it as high, and CISA gave it a CVSS 3.1 base score of 8.8, also high.
Right. And 8.8 is definitely up there.
For our audience who might be familiar with CVSS, what does that score and its vector string tell us more specifically? The vector is av.nac.lprnui RSUCHI. Check H8.
Okay, let's break that down. AVN means network attack vector. It's exploitable remotely over the internet, standard for web stuff. ACL means attack complexity is low. It's relatively easy for an attacker to pull off. No complex timing or weird conditions needed.
Okay.
PRN means privileges required. None. The attacker doesn't need any existing access or user account. UIR means user interaction is required. The user has to do something, in this case, browse to the malicious page.
Right, clicking a link or visiting a site.
Exactly. SU means scope unchanged. The exploit itself is contained within the browser process initially, though it could be used to break out later. And then CHIHAH, that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability impacts are all high. Meaning a successful exploit can lead to major data disclosure, unauthorized changes, or crashing the system. So put it all together. An 8.8 score describes a severe remote vulnerability, fairly easy to exploit, no pre-authentication needed, just needs the user to visit a page, and it can have major impacts on data and system stability.
That definitely fits the potential for arbitrary code execution. Now, the discovery of this specific bug, CVE 2025-5419, it's credited to Clement Lacine and Benoit Evans from Google's Threat Analysis Group, TAG. On May 27th, 2025.
Yes.
Google TAG being involved. That's significant, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Google TAG is specifically focused on tracking sophisticated attackers, often state-backed groups, and their campaigns. Their job is hunting the hunters, basically.
So when they find a 0-day...
It strongly suggests the exploit wasn't just found by a random researcher doing testing. It likely means TAG discovered it being actively used in targeted attacks by these advanced threat actors they monitor.
Which implies a higher level of attacker sophistication, maybe espionage or something similar driving it.
Often, yes. That's usually the context. When TAG reports a 0-day, it tells you it was already weaponized in the wild by serious players.
Okay, so TAG finds it in use on May 27th. What happens next? How does Google respond when something this critical, already being exploited, lands on their desk?
Well, Google's response, as laid out in the information, really highlights their rapid incident response process for these critical vulns. It's quite impressive.
Okay, so the timeline is key here. Discovered May 27th.
Just one day later, May 28th, Google took their first crucial step. They pushed out a configuration change.
Not a full browser update.
No, not initially. This was likely a server-side tweak or some dynamic update pushed out quickly to the stable channel across all platforms, Windows, Mac, Linux. They call it a quiet fix sometimes.
The goal being?
To mitigate the immediate threat, to disrupt those active exploitation campaigns fast before the full tested software update was ready for rollout. Think of it as an emergency stopgap.
A quick patch to stop the bleeding, essentially.
Exactly. It shows their agility. This mitigation probably broke the existing exploit that TAG found without users even needing to do anything or necessarily know about it yet.
Okay, fast initial response. And then came the full software patch.
Yes, that was step 2. The release of the proper security update with the actual code fix for CVE 2025-5419.
When did that happen?
That came out on June 3rd, 2025. It was Chrome version 137.0.7151.68 or .69 for Windows and Mac, and .68 for Linux. The release notes mentioned it would be rolling out over the coming days and weeks.
Right, the rollout isn't always instantaneous for everyone. Now, there's usually a delay in releasing the nitty-gritty technical details about 0 days, even after the patch is out, right?
Yes, and the information explains Google's thinking on that. It's a deliberate security strategy.
Why the delay?
They typically hold back the full technical details, any exploit code, or even links to the bug reports until a good majority of users have actually installed the update.
Why? To avoid arming other attackers.
Exactly. They don't want malicious actors who weren't involved in the initial exploit to just grab Google's detailed analysis and quickly build their own working exploit from it. They're trying not to hand out blueprints to the bad guys.
So prioritize getting users patched over immediate, deep technical transparency.
It's a balancing act. They also mention keeping details restricted if the bug is in, say, a third-party library that other software uses, to give those other projects time to patch too.
That makes sense. But okay, if the update rolls out over days or weeks and this thing is being actively exploited, what can someone listening right now do to make sure they're protected immediately? Waiting doesn't sound great.
This is probably the most critical, practical point here. While automatic updates are good, you absolutely can, and in this case should, manually trigger the update check.
How? Walk us through it.
Okay. On your desktop, Chrome Mac, Windows, Linux, go to the main Chrome menu. It's usually those 3 vertical dots in the top right corner.
Got it.
Click that, then go down to Help, and then select About Google Chrome.
Okay, Help. Then About Google Chrome.
Right. Clicking that opens a new tab. It shows your current version and immediately starts checking Google's servers for updates.
It checks automatically when you open that page.
Yes. If there's an update available, especially a critical security one like this, it'll usually start downloading right then and there. You'll see the progress.
And then the crucial final step is?
Once it's downloaded, the page will say something like, Update ready, and show a relaunch button. You have to click that button.
Just closing and reopening later isn't enough?
Not immediately. The update isn't fully applied, the patch isn't active, until the browser is properly relaunched using that button. It ensures everything restarts correctly with the new code.
So, menu help here. About Google Chrome. Let it download. Click relaunch.
That's the drill. Doing that gets you the fix for this actively exploited 0-day as soon as possible, instead of waiting for the automatic rollout lottery.
That manual check seems really important, especially with an active threat. And, as the information points out, this latest 0-day, CVE 2025-541 time. Well, it isn't exactly a one-off event this year, is it?
No, not at all. Looking at the broader context provided, this is actually the 3rd distinct actively exploited Chrome 0-day that Google has had to patch just since the start of 2025.
3 in about 5 months. That feels like a trend.
It definitely suggests a pattern. It's not just a fluke. It indicates a consistent, ongoing effort by attackers to find and leverage critical flaws in Chrome.
Okay, let's circle back to the first one mentioned in the material. That was patched earlier this year, back in March.
That's right, CVE 2025-2783. Similar to the latest one, it was also rated high severity, had a CVSS score of 8.3.
And what was the technical nature of that one? The description mentioned incorrect handle provided in unspecified circumstances in Mojo on Windows. Mojo again.
Yes, Mojo. This vulnerability was specifically in Chrome's Mojo library, and it affected Windows systems. Mojo, remember, is that inter-process communication or IPC library.
Right, how different parts of the browser talk to each other securely.
Exactly. Modern browsers split things up, rendering JavaScript, the main UI, into separate processes for security. Sandboxing relies on this. Mojo is the glue that lets these isolated processes communicate safely.
And speaking of sandboxes, the big impact of this CVE 2025-2783 was related to escaping the sandbox, wasn't it?
That was the critical issue. Can we talk about the sandbox concept for a sec?
Please do. It's fundamental here.
So the browser sandbox is like a virtual cage, a protective container. Potentially unsafe code from websites' JavaScript, HTML runs inside this cage.
Okay.
The operating system and browser enforce strict rules. Code inside the sandbox is heavily restricted. It can't easily access your personal files, mess with other programs, or touch sensitive system resources.
So even if malicious code exploits a bug inside the sandbox.
But the sandbox is supposed to contain it, prevent it from breaking out and harming the rest of your computer. It's a crucial layer of defense.
Got it. So a vulnerability that lets attackers bypass the sandbox.
That's incredibly serious. The information we have, citing Kaspersky researchers who found it, explicitly said CVE 2025-2783 allowed bypassing the sandbox as if it didn't even exist.
Wow. So the main barrier between a malicious website and your actual operating system just vanished.
Effectively, yes. A successful sandbox escape like that is a major prize for attackers. It often opens the door to executing arbitrary code directly on the underlying system, completely breaking free from the browser's constraints.
And the context for the 0-day exploit was quite specific, too. It was used in targeted attacks against organizations in Russia.
That's what the reporting indicated. Government agencies, media outlets, academic institutions were targeted.
Who found it?
It was reported by Boris Larin and Igor Kuznetsov from Kaspersky. They described the exploitation as technically sophisticated, pointing towards an Advanced Persistent Threat Group, or APT.
APT. That usually means state-sponsored or highly organized groups, right? Not just random hackers.
Typically, yes. APTs usually have specific strategic goals: espionage, intellectual property theft, maybe sabotage rather than just making quick money. Their attacks are targeted, persistent, and often use advanced tools, including 0 days like this one. Kaspersky tracked this specific campaign as Operation ForumTroll.
And the attack vector they described, it sounds particularly nasty because it required almost nothing from the victim.
Right. Infection apparently happened immediately after the user clicked a personalized link in a phishing email. That link took them to an attacker's website.
And that was it. Just loading the page was enough.
That's what was reported. No need to download anything extra. No clicking OK on weird prompts. Just visiting the site triggered the exploit chain.
And the links were personalized using things like fake event invites.
Yeah, things like fake invites to real events, like the Primakov readings mentioned in the material. Highly targeted social engineering to make the phishing email seem legitimate and urgent. Classic APT tactic.
The material also mentioned this vulnerability was likely designed to be used with another exploit, right, for the actual remote code execution part.
Yes, it seems the sandbox bypass, CVE 2025-2783, was step 1. The attackers likely had a second exploit ready to deploy once they were outside the sandbox to gain full control, though the researchers didn't manage to capture that second stage.
But the intent is clear. Chain exploits. Bypass defenses, then execute code.
It's a very common pattern in sophisticated attacks. Google patched this one back in March in Chrome version 134 for Windows.
Okay, so that's 0-day number 1 from 2025. Then there was a second one patched in May.
Correct. That was identified as CVE 2025-4664. It prompted another round of emergency updates from Google in May.
And what was the issue there? What part of Chrome was affected?
This one was described as an insufficient policy enforcement vulnerability in Chrome's loader component.
The loader, what'd that do?
It's involved in how the browser loads certain resources and code, and policy enforcement refers to the security rules that are supposed to make sure code runs within defined boundaries and with the right permissions.
So a failure to enforce those rules properly.
Seems like it. The information suggests this flaw could be exploited remotely to bypass those security policies,
Leading to
potentially unauthorized code execution, maybe another route to sandbox escape. And significantly, the reporting around this one specifically mentioned it could allow attackers to take over user accounts.
account takeover. That's very direct, very impactful for users.
Definitely. And CVE 2025-4664 was quickly added to CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, the KE list.
Ah, the CISA cavies. That's a big deal, isn't it?
It is. Inclusion, there is official confirmation that a vulnerability is being actively exploited in the wild. It puts pressure on U.S. federal agencies and critical infrastructure to patch immediately. It basically underlines the real-world threat and urgency.
Okay, so let's try and connect the dots here. We've got CVE 2025-2783 in March, the Mojo sandbox escape targeting Russia. Then CVE 2025-4664 in May, the loader policy bypass potential account takeover hit the KEV list. And now CVE 2025-5420 found in June, the V8 out-of-bounds read-write found by tag.
3 confirmed, actively exploited 0 days, patched in just 5 months.
That really doesn't feel like coincidence anymore.
No, it points to a sustained effort. Attackers are consistently finding ways into Chrome's critical components. It suggests they're either getting better at finding these complex bugs, or they're dedicating serious resources to targeting browsers because, well, everyone uses them, maybe both.
And look at the components hit. V8, the JavaScript engine, Mojo, IPC and sandboxing, the loader, policy enforcement. The material even mentioned a bug in Blink, the rendering engine, patched alongside the latest V8 issue, though that one wasn't flagged as a 0 day.
Right. These aren't peripheral features. They're hitting the core processing engines and security architecture. Exploits there offer the biggest potential payoff for an attacker.
The nature of the attacks also seems consistently serious. Espionage with the first one, potential account takeover with the second, general code execution, and data exposure with the third.
And the way in is consistently simple for the user, unfortunately. Visiting a crafted web page, often delivered via phishing. It bypasses the need to trick someone into running a separate program. The browser itself is the attack vector.
Which makes everyone a potential target.
Pretty much. And the fact that these are repeatedly described as actively exploited in the wild, found by tag, classified as APT activity, it just reinforces that these aren't theoretical lab experiments. These are weapons being used right now by sophisticated adversaries.
Which brings us back to the crucial, practical takeaway for everyone listening. What's the bottom line here?
Well, vigilance against phishing is always good advice, of course. But the single most effective defense against these specific kinds of sophisticated, actively exploited browser zero days is remarkably simple.
Keep your browser updated.
Keep your browser updated. That manual check we talked about, menu help, about Google Chrome relaunch, do it regularly, especially when you hear news about emergency patches or zero days. Getting that patch installed quickly is your best protection.
Because the attackers are already using the vulnerability before the patch is widely deployed.
Exactly. Closing that window of opportunity as fast as possible is key.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just about Google Chrome, is it?
Absolutely not. Chrome is built on the open source Chromium project, and many other popular browsers use Chromium too. Microsoft Edge, Brave, Opera, Vivaldi, the list goes on.
So, a vulnerability in a core Chromium component like V8 or Mojo.
It very often affects those other browsers as well. Each vendor has their own update schedule and process, but users of any Chromium-based browser need to be just as vigilant about applying security updates promptly. The risk isn't confined to just Chrome users.
So this pattern of 0 days really reflects an ongoing battle to secure the fundamental technology behind a huge chunk of the browser market.
That's a good way to put it. Keeping any of these browsers updated is just critical hygiene in today's environment.
This deep dive really underscores how vital that seemingly boring task of updating software actually is. It's your shield against some really advanced threats out there.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that's been quite an intense look at the sharp end of browser security threats, drawing directly from the details and the information we had. We've defined what makes a 0 day so dangerous.
Yeah, we dug into the technical nature and the impact of this latest one, CVE 2025-5419,
Analyzed Google's pretty impressive rapid response strategy.
and placed it all within that broader pattern of actively exploited Chrome 0 days we've seen throughout 2025.
The key insight really seems clear. The software we rely on every single day is a constant target. And staying proactive by keeping it updated. It's not just a suggestion anymore.
No, it's really an essential defense strategy for navigating the digital world safely.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you to consider. Given this relentless pace, attackers finding critical flaws, vendors racing to patch, what does this constant high-stakes cat-and-mouse game mean for the future?
Yeah, what does it mean for the long-term security model of the web browser itself? Is the current architecture basically sound, just needing constant patching and vigilance?
Or could this pattern eventually force us towards entirely new ways of thinking about how we browse the web safely?
It's a huge question. The browser is our main gateway to everything online. Its security impacts us all profoundly.
Indeed it does. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into browser security. And one last time, we want to extend our sincere gratitude to our sponsor, Stonefly.
Yes, thank you, Stonefly.
Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. If you're looking for that robust, ransomware-proof storage to protect your critical data.
And who isn't these days?
Right. Stonefly offers specialized, air-gapped, and immutable storage solutions designed exactly for that challenge. Protect your valuable data assets.
You can learn more and schedule a demo by contacting sales at stonefly.com. Really vital work they're doing in securing data against modern threats.
Definitely check them out. Until our next deep dive,
Stay updated and stay safe out there.
we'll see you next time.